Hi again, I'm Mark. Welcome back to Three Bridges and my loft layout based on railway journeys of my life. So back in the loft and starting here at Station Road south of Harrow on the Hill. And for this one I'm just going to work around Harrow on the Hill, either side of the main station building, do some bits. But the first bit there is at the very end of the road. You can see I've got the first of the sort of backdrop buildings in, sort of as the road turns around. So I'm doing lots of little scratch build kit bashes in this one to just add in a bit more detail around the main station with very small buildings. This is the first of the two areas I'm going to work on. So this is on the south side, so you've got the three platforms, and it's these gaps here where there's, when you look on a Google Earth sort of view down, you can see lots of old rails and just sort of I suppose station debris. There's some ramps down for the workforce, and then there's a building and various bits of stuff that's been dumped or where they've changed the rails. So I'll do a bit of that and get the ground cover in as well. And then the other part is at the other end of the station. So the north end of the station, I've already done a bit of sort of the ground cover already. But again, there's a couple of buildings sitting here, another one there, and again some ramps down. I'll carry on working on building up the scene with some extra stuff. Okay, so one of the images I showed you was the approach to Harrow on the Hill. This is a building I remember. From the picture, the windows are actually squarer. It always looked like a face to me and a nose. And so I created it from memory, and then I found it. Had to go back about 10 years. So clearly it's been demolished. Next to it and behind it is this building that's still there, although it sort of looks derelict, so it's sort of an odd shape from above, and there's some back windows as well. I still need to sort out the glazing for those. And then these are my little ramps that will go at the end of the... So to spray paint the building, I did an undercoat in just an acrylic grey, just so that if you spray on to the pure cardboard with the Tamiya, it sort of soaks in. Takes a number of coats to get sort of the white to show through, so it's easier to just prime it. So I did that first, and then I've got the Tamiya flat white, and then it's sort of heavily diluted down, so it's probably about a third paint, 2/3 of the isopropyl alcohol, and then various other I think in the past there's a little bit of sort of a beige in there, but it's basically like a grubby off-white colour. So this little pot just gets dregs thrown into it, topped up appropriately, so it's not as pure as this. So that's done the most of the building sides. And then for the roof, which has obviously got the streaks of grey, when I'd finished spraying this in the airbrush, there was a little bit left, so I just added a tiny drop of some gunmetal, again heavily diluted down. It's almost like a wash, that one, but it just creates a darker grey, and then as you can see, as it comes through, you can a little bit of streaking as well as this paint in the airbrush starts to get darker. So knowing how it's going to change, sort of work on it. And the same with the other roofs. We start off with the grey acrylic, which is a Vallejo, and then using whatever's left in the airbrush to just put in a bit of that discoloration you can often see. So each paint mix is unique, really. Just go with the flow at that building. I know the ramps seem very short and steep, and this building doesn't seem the right size. With everything with the model, it's compression, isn't it, to do it. So if I take the real scale of Harrow Hill Station, from where these buildings are sitting just before the main building to Station Road, it's about 250 metres, I can sort of guess, so about 800 feet. And then the approach to Harrow Hill for the tracks is, again, another sort of 250 metres really. In the loft, if I scaled that down, I would need about 3 metres of length. I've sort of squashed Harrow Hill. It's between 3 rafters, so it's about 1.8 metres. It's about 6 feet, I think. So that's, I've had to shrink it anyway, and to get these in, I'm having to shrink the length of them really. But it gives the feel of what's happening at those sort of points. That's the dilemma of modelling, what to include and what to reduce the scale of. But I'm quite happy about that. So I think the next thing to do is do there's one last building to do, which is a brick building, sort of half built, but I can work on the ground scatter where I've got the gaps now, and then I can start placing these various components and then start thinking about other stuff to include in the scene. Unfortunately, I've run out of the railings down. I'm at a train show next month, so I'll try and get some more there, I think. So I'm just working on one last building, sort of an infill building that goes behind the main sort of Harrow Hill concourse building. At the moment it's sort of stopped, and then the East Coast West Coast line sort of knit behind it. So this is just a small sort of box that will bridge that gap from the end of the concourse to the back scene, so and allow the trains to run underneath. Well, it's the end of the week. Been away for the weekend, so I didn't get as much done as I'd hoped to, but this scene sort of keeps evolving. So a couple of things. I've done the sort of boxed in tunnel at the end for the East Coast West Coast line. These so they're like warehouse backdrop buildings they've got on the backboard. Come to conclusion they're too small, so I'm going to reprint them and just increase the scale up a bit so that they're more in keeping with these houses in the corner, which from the scale scenes sort of 70s so many touches that I sort of grew up in for a period of my life. So I'll increase the backdrops to a similar sort of scale. And then when I get some more extra railings, I'll sort of finish off the ramps down, and there's a few extra bits of sort of the electrics cabling that I need to do coming out of Harrow Hill building. I also need to finish the Harrow Hill tower, as at the moment you can see it's sort of held together with a couple of elastic bands. I want to fit a light in here, so I need to do that first, and then I can sort of seal it all up. And I think there's a door to go on the back, and a few other small bits. So if I move to this shot where I'm looking across Harrow Hill, and this is sort of the main view I'll get in from below the board above. So that's the top of the backboard there, which is basically the height I can, maximum height I can get to. So I've got this building. I made this a while back. It's sort of inspired by an office block that's actually at Harrow Hill in the backdrop, but at the time I couldn't work out how to do get the three-dimensional, and so I went for a lighter brick, but I made a mistake of doing it on both sides. So I'll darken out one of the sides so that it's more in shadow, and then underneath the building at the moment I need to create that a bit darker. And then what I need to sort of draw my attention to is the rest of the back scene. So effectively I need to hide the East Coast West Coast lines going through. There was an old sort of 70s, maybe 60s sort of building that's completely been demolished and replaced, obviously, with new tower blocks. But by the time, I suppose 10 years ago, it was completely derelict and vandalised and heavily graffitied. But that's sort of out of the area I'm looking at. So I'm back in the 80s. So in the 80s it was still in use, but not the most glamorous of buildings. So I've taken some inspiration from some sort of 70s prefab schools, and I'm going to create something there that will effectively bridge the gap between the backboard and that back station wall where I've got all the music posters, and that'll sort of continue on for about half of it, and then the second half of the scene here, where you're sort of going from the end here to the back of Station Road bridge, is trees. So I will have a retaining wall and then a bit of an embankment and have the trees on top. So it's sort of the last bit of greenery really as I'm heading into the end of the stations. I just need to put in some retaining walls just at the end of the platforms that they have, sort of thing. There's a little gate either side for the ramps down, so I'll finish those off and you'll see them next time. And if I find some more sort of railway yard, I suppose, debris at the railway show I'm going to the end of March, I'll get a few bits to actually add to this scene as well. So slowly getting there. I'd like to do the cabling down and along, but I don't think I've got much left, and until Tim Surf either makes some more or sometime in the future I find a different way to do it. At the moment the cabling will have to stay as is. The only other thing for the station as well is I need to have some signs and a few people. I'll work on something else this week. There's a little bit of framework stuff to do. I'm not quite sure how much there'll be to film, but and I'm away again next weekend, so there's not going to be a lot done this week. I may even just put up a small shunting video from the goods yard in front, as it's nice and warmer up here now, not so freezing cold, so it'd be nice to get up here, give the tracks a bit of a clean off with a bit of wood, and run some trains, which is I've missed doing for a number of months. Anyway, spring definitely here, weather getting warmer. As always, if you've made it this far, thanks so much. I do appreciate those who do follow, like, and the few of you who subscribe. Hopefully you've come back again. and I'll see you next time, where I'll still be working around the Harrow on the Hill station, slowly getting there. I'll try and do a long shot along it so you can see it in more perspective of how it fits with the surrounding structures.